Is the new Superman movie carrying a hidden pro-Palestinian message? That seems to be the conclusion many viewers have reached just days after the hotly anticipated James Gunn film was released. The reboot of the beloved franchise sees the Man of Steel intervening to protect the fictional downtrodden nation of Jarhanpur from invasion by its neighbor Boravia and its high-tech military, backed by the United States. Sound familiar? Some people certainly think so. To tell us more, we're joined now by MEE reporter Tamara Himani. Tamara, welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Now, have you seen this film?
I have not, although it's top of my list for this weekend.
Yeah, me too. But that hasn't stopped the reactions. I've seen so many reactions. I've already seen a lot of spoilers. I think I have a good sense of what happens at the start and the end of the film.
I think you could construct the plot of the film purely from the tweets about it.
Yeah.
So that's been helpful.
I mean, how are people reacting?
So there's been a lot of online reactions, most of them actually kind of identifying this as kind of a implicit pro-Palestine message. They kind of have identified Boravia, this, high-tech, wealthy, close ally of the U.S., as kind of a stand-in for Israel. And then they've seen Jarhanpur, this poor, downtrodden nation that's, fenced in and whose people are basically defenseless against Boravia's invasion. They've seen that as a kind of stand-in for Palestine, and they see kind of like that relationship and, Superman who wants to intervene on their defense as kind of a kind of, the collective moral conscience of people who should be intervening against a U.S. invasion of, a U.S. support for an Israeli invasion of Gaza.
Now, we're seeing here some of the pretty celebratory tweets of people heralding this film as a political message, one that is in line with a big part of online sentiments. But does everybody share this theory about what this Superman film intends to say?
So, there's obviously been a bit of backlash from more pro-Israel commentators who say that, this is pro-Palestinian voices and, the left kind of reading into this an allegory that doesn't exist and kind of this actually has nothing to do with Israel, which was pretty interesting. But then, you also had actually the Israeli embassy in LA kind of reacting to this by saying, the real superheroes are, Israeli soldiers and kind of you can only see that in real life. So there is a kind of like a Schrodinger's allegory of like, this isn't about us, but even if it is, it's completely wrong. And I think no one encapsulated that better than Ben Shapiro. And he kind of said in his kind of review of the film that this would be completely inaccurate to say it was about Israel and Palestine. And anyone who thought so would just had a poisoned left-wing brain, which is a, unfortunate place to be in.
I mean, it's an interesting question, right? Like, are we so Twitter-brained that we will project anything that is remotely close to something that is resembling the political situation that we live in onto a film? Or is this something that is a kind of a Trojan horse into the last place that you would think for there to be a pro-Palestinian message?
I mean, look, I would be extremely impressed if the director Dunn had scripted and produced and edited this whole film within the past year and a half.
Yeah.
I think that would really be a feat of nature. I think it's more likely that we're obviously in a very polarized time. The U.S. politics and politics of Israel and Gaza is very cynical and very hopeless at the moment. And I think it's not a stretch for people to want to read in to cultural moments that they feel kind of vindicate their political viewpoint. You know what I mean? I think they're we've seen this figure in previous films. Snow White, there was a whole media storm over that film because of the various viewpoints of its stars. The series Andor had an episode on ethnic cleansing and occupation, and that kind of got articulated into the Israel-Gaza. And we've seen the same with musicians and concerts, Kneecap and Residente and so on. So I think it's very understandable that during this time, each kind of political camp, as it were, are really looking for the source guess, that they think proves that they are on, the right side of history or the right side of this argument.
Now, every media storm inevitably ends with Trump. So I know you have something to show us on that. So how has Trump himself reacted to this, and also like summarize basically what this media storm ultimately means?
In his kind of typically understated and subtle way, Trump has sort of sought to put his own twist on this, to suggest that it's not about Israel, not about Palestine, it's not about Russia, it's not about Ukraine. It's about the one and only Trump himself. And I think that's just another example of how the Trump administration has really sought to insert the president into kind of the cultural sphere and kind of use his charisma as a reality TV star to kind of create this kind of I guess cult of personality, this fan base around the president / superhero, depending on which way you look at it.
So you're gonna go see the film?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, we might need to catch up afterwards, and then
definitely.
You might come out and be like, you know what? Yeah, this is actually a very pro-Palestinian film. It's really obvious.
Yeah, for sure. Only a shame that Donald isn't starring in it himself.
Not yet.
Yeah, who knows for the sequel.
Tamara Hamani, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.